Hello, hello. My name is Kayla Brick. I am a Upwork coach and professional illustrator. Today we're talking about the differences between Upwork and Fiverr. So I have been accused of not liking Fiverr, and that is completely inaccurate, to be clear, for the record. I started on Fiverr. It is my very first freelancing platform. So I have a lot of love for Fiverr. It is the place that I fell in love with freelancing. So for any of you who are in my classes who are saying I don't like Fiverr, of course I'm biased at this point because I did move to Upwork. And there are reasons for that, and I have a separate video for that as well if you want to hear more about my story and why I did those things. But I do like Fiverr, I promise. But let's talk about the differences between them. This is not a video to try and convince you of which ones you should be on. You should be on both if you're a freelancer. It attracts a different kind of client, and I'm going to talk about the differences between them in that way. But we're not trying to convince you to do Upwork versus Fiverr. It is more of a personal preference thing, and if you are trying to be efficient, it's a good idea to be on both. So let's talk about Upwork. Upwork is generally going to attract a more long-term client. They're usually a little bit higher ticket jobs, so the budgets are a little bit higher, generally speaking. And this is not always the case, of course, because we do have invites, but it is usually geared towards you reaching out to clients. So they'll put a job listing on. So any of these here, these are all job listings that a client put together on their side of things. And then you, as the freelancer, use Connects, these guys right here, which Upwork is a pay-to-play system. It's a very inexpensive pay-to-play system, but it does have that embedded into it's kind of baked into the whole system and the platform itself. These are what you are using kind of like as tokens almost to bid and send in a proposal to a client for any of these job listings. Each of them costs a different amount. So let's just say we can look at this guy right here. It's going to cost us 6 Connects in order to send a proposal right here. So that's pretty inexpensive. Usually it's between 6 and 7 on the low end, all the way up to 16 at the high end. Different kind of client is going to ask for that level of Connects because that is a number that they pick, but it's going to be within that range. So that's the difference for Upwork, is that we are using our little tokens in order to even be involved in any of these things. At a certain point, once your profile is optimized, you'll start getting what are called invites, which is clients reaching out to you. And those generally don't cost Connects in order for you to send things into them. But that's mainly the difference there, is Upwork is more of a, you have to go after the clients. And because of that, it attracts a little bit more of a high-end client, let's say. They want to work with you long term, they want to pay you more generally, and that's a lot of times what I like about it personally. Is I like that we can look at any of these job listings, for example, and see who is this client, what's their budget, how do they want to work with you, do they want to work long term, is it a 6-month contract? We're getting a little bit more information. This is why I love Upwork, because the back-end process for Upwork's going through contracts and looking through the proposals that a freelancer sends in, the clients are a little more overwhelmed. And so it creates this environment of once they find a freelancer, they don't really want to leave. So if you're, let's say, a graphic designer, they want to just do this whole process one time, and you're then their graphic designer pretty much forever, which is fabulous, because if you end up getting that job with them, they end up working with you for years oftentimes, which the life cycle of that contract and the money that you make from that contract is so different than the contracts that you would do on Fiverr, which are a little bit more open and then closed. Not to say you won't have those on Upwork, they will happen. You will see things where client comes in, you do this whole process with him, and then the contract closes after one cycle. But in general, that's not the case. Most clients on here are going to want to do this one time. And if they do this again, it's going to be to get an entirely different kind of freelancer. But then they'll work with that freelancer again for a long period of time because they don't want to do this whole process again. We get a lot more information on Upwork. I have tons of information about where the client is, what their budget is, description of the thing. I can see a little bit of activity on the job, which I talk about in other videos. And I can see how their algorithm works. Upwork's algorithm is a lot easier to understand, luckily. It's very keyword based. Their algorithm is very cut and dry, easy to understand what's going on, and we love it for that. Downsides to Upwork, let's talk about them. It costs connects. This is not a fun thing to have to spend money on, especially in the beginning when you're just sending proposals out and you don't fully understand why they're not being seen by clients. Watch my other videos. I have actually a video on how to solve that. But if you're just starting on Upwork, God, it's confusing. This is a part of Upwork that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. These also, I mean, there's so many things to look at on Upwork. There's so many different screens. You don't know if you're doing well for a while because you just send out proposals and you don't hear back. And you're like, what is this? Why do I have to buy that? Do I boost? Do I not boost? Where do I find the thing? And there's 5,000 different screens, and then Upwork has the audacity to create different naming conventions for everything. So interviews, for example, it's not the correct word for what is happening there. This just means that somebody has sent a message to a freelancer. So client sent a message to a freelancer and they consider that to be interviewing, which isn't accurate, really. Oh, I didn't mention this. This is out of order. I love that we can actually see what the client says about freelancers. This is awesome because you get to actually see what happened with this contract. What was the budget for? Does it match the budget they're giving you now? We have so much information to work with. I know who I'm working with before I ever talk to them. It's awesome. Back to bad things. Upwork has the tendency to find little ways in order to get more money out of you. And they don't mean this in a bad way because they are very freelancer focused. They have a tendency to make things, decide things that are in the freelancer's favor, generally speaking. However, Upwork is a business and they are trying to, I don't want to say prey on because it sounds a little nefarious, but they are aware of the fact that you, as possibly a new person on Upwork, don't understand how the system works. You're frustrated with how the system works. You don't like to have to buy connects in order to do the thing. You're frustrated with the whole process. And so they'll put the availability badge, they'll put the boosting in various places, they'll put it with your proposals, they'll put it in, they'll have these consultation things, they'll have all kinds of stuff. Upwork Pro, which is also not good, and as soon as it's good, I'll tell you guys it's good, but until then I will just not do that because it's not good. And they know that because they send polls to us in email asking us, so what can we do to improve? And they don't understand why it's bad, so they can't really fully fix it. And anyway, that's a whole other thing. There's secret areas of Upwork, for example. If we go into this area here, this entire area of Upwork that has filters, there's the advanced search that you wouldn't have even known about unless you used the search function. So that makes things more challenging for you, especially as a new person on here. If you go to your profile, we have this job success score. Scary, not fun, doesn't really communicate to anyone. And it feels like if you don't have this thing or top rated status, then you're not really competing at the top level of Upwork, which is not true at all. You can make tons of money as a freelancer. And this is also a frustrating thing because it doesn't actually show how much I've made on here because I have a number of contracts that have not closed. We have these contracts here. But this is frustrating because Upwork just does this where it hides stuff from you. It also doesn't tell you fully why your job success score is what it is or why you have top rated or not. Challenging, confusing. It's kind of the theme with Upwork is that its interface is just not good. But once you understand it, everything changes. What are these profiles? Specialized profiles, by the way, they're just profiles that can help target a very specific client. But they don't tell that to you, do they? There's nothing to guide you through this process. At no point are you given really any instructions past the initial onboarding process. Another thing about Upwork, this is also pretty similar with Fiverr and pretty similar with really any freelancing platform, but it is subject to various ebbs and flows when it comes to the kinds of work you're getting on here. So you might see the really low paying, really awful kinds of jobs in front of you at various points of the year. I highly recommend you go check out my video on using filters for Upwork because it does help with this to make sure that you're just seeing the really high budget stuff or you're only seeing the low budget stuff if you are trying to get those reviews in the first couple weeks or so on here. But it's part of the process of any freelancing site is you are subject to humans being humans. So let's say that it is during the holidays or various points in the year are going to be a little bit slower. Difficult jobs on here, you're going to see some scams. That's going to happen throughout the year, of course, but certain kinds of times of the year it's going to slow down. People may not respond to you. Upwork is a weird one where if you send anything on the weekends, for example, it's just not as likely to get seen. Clients are not nearly as serious because that's how humans are. They're not really thinking about work on the weekends oftentimes, so they're not as serious about it. And that's not fully unique to Upwork. It's just something to consider if you're, and this is a lot of reasons why I think you should be on Upwork and Fiverr, because if one starts to dip, the other one might cover it a little bit. But that's the Upwork side of things. I'm sure I could find other things that I could complain about and also rave about because I love this platform. All right, let's talk about Fiverr. So this is a gig-based system. So let's look at this one here. So you'll have a basic, standard, and premium level of different packages that you make available to clients. So the basic level is $5, standard is 10, and then all the way up to 20 in this case. They can go much higher, but Fiverr is a little bit more towards the cheaper end of the spectrum. So you're going to start, and that's why it's called Fiverr, right? So we have $5 usually as the starting point, and then we start going up into the 15 or 40 or 100 or whatever it is. So it's usually in these upsell structures. And when I say an upsell, I do mean a add-on of some kind. So you have your basic package, which is probably a basic edit in this case. Editing is a little bit more vague and subjective, but one video, couple of revisions placed into that very simple contract. And then we go to standard, which adds a little bit extra. There's some things in delivery that's a little bit different here. But you essentially start with your basic package and then you add on various things as the process goes along when the client orders this thing that you've offered. It's a little bit more hands-off, so you don't know who this client is, you don't know what they're ordering. That's why a lot of times people on Fiverr will try and do this, which is the contact before ordering thing, because it's the only way you're going to have any control over what they order. Because a lot of times the client wants something, it's not really baked into this particular structure, and so they order it, and then you guys have to renegotiate after you guys have done this whole thing. And it creates this, what Fiverr hopes is a seamless process, but ends up being a little bit more complicated, especially when it comes to what you're being paid on the back end there. And what I found is exactly that, is that you had people coming in the door thinking they were ordering a certain thing, and then they would come back to you with more revisions, and it would just end up making everybody frustrated. But for quick stuff, this is what Fiverr's really wonderful at, is that if someone does fall into any of these particular tiers, you have a very seamless process. Someone orders this, they want one video, it's within this number of seconds, they pay you this amount of money and takes this much time. This, when done right, when it all works together, is really wonderful. I've had successful contracts on here. I've had various people work with me. I did a lot of caricature work at one point where people ordered the thing, they gave me references, because you can ask clients questions too, which is not something that Upwork lets you do, which is something I wish they would adopt a little more. Is you can ask questions of the client, they can upload pictures for you before the work even starts, so you have some information going into it, and then you can just get started and then deliver the work. And it's not as complicated as Upwork's contract system, which has milestones embedded into it, which is not always the most easy thing to describe, unfortunately. But Fiverr is very cut and dry. It's, you have a gig, you order the thing, and you're kind of off to the races. And that's really it. The problems start to show when we talk about pricing. So if we have a $5 client in general, they're going to be a little bit more difficult, a little more micromanaged in general. Not everyone is like this, but it tends to attract that kind of person because they don't have as much skin in the game. They're not as invested financially, so they feel a little bit more like they can ask for more. I don't love the fact that you don't know who's ordering these things, and that's why this is in bold, is because they're trying to talk to the client before they order anything, which doesn't always work. A lot of clients on here don't do that, and they just order it anyway, and then you end up having just a challenging, difficult experience on the back end. But when everything works really well and you have just a very simple job that you need to just get done, Fiverr is fantastic for that. It also has your portfolio at the top. It has all of this stuff very easily understood. So there's no pressure on you to negotiate as much because it's all on the front end. Whereas Upwork, you do have to negotiate a little bit more in the messaging center to actually come to a contract. It's a little more difficult to actually send that contract to a client on Upwork. This is very easy to do. Back end for this, sending a contract, if they do this where they reach out to you via Messenger and you need to send them a custom contract, so easy. Fiverr has made it so easy to make a custom contract for a client on here. So if they do reach out to you, so easy to do. Very streamlined, actually. This is all super cool because if you do have the correct financial budget range in the front end and everything makes sense and you've done it where it's structured a certain way and you've really thought it out, also can work rather well too. So it is kind of on you on the back end to enforce this stuff a little bit. So that also makes things a little bit difficult too. But I like the way that Fiverr has structured their gig setup. We have the portfolio at the top, which is really easy to scroll through. All of the various testimonials are very high up. Makes it very easy for people to order and see everything, which is really lovely. So some benefits to Fiverr as well. I like the gig structure. I like that the financial stuff is all on the front end. If everything works really well, and you have a reasonable client, it is perfect. It's seamless. Everything works so well on Fiverr. I just haven't experienced that personally. I haven't experienced everybody contacting before ordering. I haven't experienced them not trying to get 3 or 4 revisions for the $5. It's just that's my personal experience on Fiverr. And so I like Upwork because you can bake all of those things into your contract before you ever start working with them. Challenging thing is that getting the contract to them, if the client doesn't know how to do it on their end, it's not always the most intuitive, which is Upwork's challenge. They have a tendency to have a really weird interface. Fiverr wins, hands down, period, full stop in that category. So those are the differences between Fiverr and Upwork. I have complained at length today. I do love Fiverr. I really do. It was the place that I started freelancing. It is the place that I fell in love with freelancing. I've had some wonderful clients on here. This platform made me believe that I could do freelancing. So I do love Fiverr. I just couldn't stand this part right here. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be on it. I think that you should experience both and see what it feels like, because you, as a freelancer, may end up struggling intensely with Upwork's interface and just not being able to know where to find things. You may not want to pay for connects. You may not want to do all that. And that's perfectly fine. I respect that. You may not want to do the gig system on Fiverr. I get it, It's whatever works best for you personally. If you want to be on both, which I highly recommend, then be on both. But that's the difference between Upwork and Fiverr. I hope this was helpful to you in making a decision on being on one or the other or on both. And I will see you guys in the next one.